Hi, I'm Mokoso, and I'm your host for the hashtag Share My Experience podcast. All I ever wanted to do was sing. I had so many dreams where I was a famous singer performing on a well-lit stage, wearing a shimmering costume in front of a sea of adoring fans who were singing along to my song at the top of their voices. Those were my favorite kinds of dreams, the ones where I woke up with a smile on my face. Singing wasn't always my dream. I started out wanting to be a talk show host, like Oprah Winfrey or Sally Jesse Raphael. But things changed after I watched the Grace Kennedy show for the first time, where I saw a beautiful black woman singing, dancing, and interviewing people. That soon became my favorite show, and my dreams expanded after that. Growing up in a conservative middle income family, my parents had high expectations for their children. They did their best to make sure that we got quality education and access to wholesome extracurricular activities that exposed us to the world without necessarily spoiling us. The objective was to give us the life that they never had so that we could do better for ourselves. And of course, this came with very high expectations. This is why I could never imagine telling them of my dream. Imagine telling my parents that I wanted to go into show business, as it was called back then. I found out I could sing actually by accident. I really didn't think I could. One day during the school assembly, while we were singing hymns, some teachers decided to go around the lines checking for people who didn't have their songs of praise. Now, that was a mandatory book that every student had to bring to the assembly. And I didn't. It had been stolen a few weeks before. That was one book that was always in high demand and had the highest probability of getting stolen from your school bag in class. My friend always had hers in her pocket, in the pocket of her school uniform. Smart girl. I regret teasing her now about it, because she never had to look for her SOP. Those found without their copy were punished, and the last thing that I wanted on that fine Monday morning was to spend my time serving punishment. So I escaped, moving along the line as stealthily as I could, escaping the notice of teachers. I was lucky enough to hide behind some taller pupils. The lines were being checked from back to front, and the closer I got to the front of the assembly line, the more conspicuous I became. It was very hard to hide behind the kids in the lower classes. But just before I could be nabbed, I joined the first line in the assembly, the choir. Now, these were the only ones who weren't checked for their songs of praise because it was assumed that they all had their copy. After all, they're the ones who led the school in the hymns. And that day, ladies and gentlemen, was the day I joined the school choir and where my love for music truly bloomed. I started out playing the recorder with the band because I was so fascinated by it. But one day, while singing along to a new song the choir master was teaching, he singled me out to sing a solo. I was confused, but he helped me and he persisted and he kept saying, "You can do it." And by the next assembly, I was brought out and given the microphone to lead the assembly in singing the new song. The feeling was like nothing I'd ever felt before, and I knew that I wanted to sing from then on. My father wanted me to be a doctor. I was the best student in science in my class, and naturally, he believed that my proficiency in the subject automatically meant that I should study medicine. I accepted what he'd presented by the sheer power of suggestion. I didn't feel like I had a choice. He always spoke about me becoming a doctor with so much pride. When he talked about me going to the university, he always said, "This is my daughter who's going to be a doctor." He even picked out which university I would go to. Of course, it had to be his alma mater. So when asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, my answer was always, "I want to be a doctor." to the pride of my parents. But deep down, I knew I didn't want to be a doctor. I actually hated blood, and the thought of potentially seeing it every day terrified me. But of course, I couldn't say that. I eventually got into the university to study medicine, and I was so excited. No, not at the prospect of studying medicine, but the fact that for the first time in my life, I was on my own. I was free to do what I wanted to do with no curfew, no chores, and no one to answer to on a daily basis. University to me was heaven on earth. I quickly made friends with some cool girls in my hostel, and even though they weren't studying medicine like me, we got on pretty well. We all had a few classes together, and so we got to hang out quite often. They had attended the same secondary school and were quite popular there, and so they knew lots of people by virtue of the fact that their secondary school was on campus. Thanks to them, I started to have many friends. They were considered it girls and got invited to all the cool parties and had access to all the hottest clubs. My social calendar was constantly full. As part of one of the most popular crews in school, I had the attention and recognition for my talents that I needed to be able to perform at shows organized by the coolest clubs on campus. I was that girl who could really sing. And so I chose a stage name and performed all the latest songs, complete with choreography and dancers, putting on my best performance every time. Now, this took quite a lot of practice, and I was determined to be the best performer at every event I attended. My classes began to interfere with my social life, and when the choice came up to decide which I'd give my attention to, I bet on myself. You see, I was a brilliant student in secondary school. Even though I didn't exactly top my class all the time, I didn't do too badly. I developed a study habit that helped me to pass my exams then. I knew I had a great short-term memory retention rate, so I read just before my exams, and this almost always guaranteed that I passed. Now, if only someone had let me know that university was a far cry from secondary school. And it took me a while to realize that my erstwhile efforts wouldn't guarantee academic success, especially as a medical student. I managed to get through my pre-med exams, but by the second time I failed my first professional exams, I was feeling lost and desperate. I'd admitted to my parents that I was struggling, and my father continually reassured me and expressed his confidence in my abilities to pass my exams and progress. Even though I was doubtful, I kept at it. I simply couldn't muster the discipline and commitment that I knew was required for the study. The reading syllabus was so volume heavy, and I just couldn't concentrate for long periods of time or remember much of what I read after spending hours trying to study. And then the study groups, the ones I joined didn't help much because I felt so left behind. Half the time I had no idea what they were talking about, and I didn't want to appear dumb, so I kept my questions and confusion to myself. I already knew that some of them talked about me behind my back and judged me for being too social. I didn't pay them much mind because who said that doctors cannot be socially aware and well-rounded? Well, that's the kind of doctor I planned to be. When I was asked to withdraw for failing my second MBBS examination for the third time, I was depressed and almost suicidal. I'd given up singing and performing and tried my best to focus on becoming a doctor, mostly because my parents had changed their attitude towards my failures from encouragement to outright disappointment. I especially did not want to keep disappointing my father, but I just couldn't help it. I felt like the train had left the station and I wasn't on it. I tried my best to catch up unsuccessfully, and after a while, I just gave up. After I withdrew from the Department of Medicine, I managed to get into the Department of Education, so I could at least get a degree, but that didn't give me any joy. My classmates were mostly elderly people who worked as or inspired to be teachers. Ew. Save for a few rejects like me, it was a very uninspiring group to learn with, so I didn't put much effort into the whole experience. I ended up spending a total of 8 years at the university and graduated with a pass and a feeling that I had failed badly at life. I had no friends from school, and I was resentful of my childhood friends who were living their dream and had seemingly left me behind. But the situation at home was the hardest for me to deal with. My younger siblings had caught up with and even surpassed me academically and vocationally. It was hard for me to come to terms with the fact that I'd gone from being the bright, promising star to the black sheep of the family. I was now a source of shame and disappointment to my parents, and nothing I could do seemed to be able to make them proud. My dreams of becoming a recording artist had died a slow and painful death on the altar of gaining a medical degree. Disillusioned and uninspired are the only words I can use to describe myself now. But I know I can't give up. But I also know that I can't stay here. I have to leave and start afresh somewhere else, somewhere where no one knows me. Now, all I need is a plan. And here's the afterword. I watched a video on social media once where a child psychologist was advocating for parents to stop asking their children what they wanted to be when they grew up. The rationale behind this was that there was a paradigm shift in the world of work, and jobs exist today that didn't exist 15 years ago. Not only are these jobs new and different, they are a far cry from what parents traditionally consider noble or professional. The question here is, are these jobs relevant to society, lucrative, sustainable, and contributing positively to the world we live in? And the answer to all these questions is yes. By forcing or projecting their professional aspirations on children, parents run the risk of driving them to set up their livelihoods for jobs that could lose their relevance or become obsolete in their lifetime. With the rise of technology and artificial intelligence, the world is rapidly evolving into a place with endless possibilities. So by limiting their options and their outlooks, parents are actually being detrimental to their children's future. If you're a young person struggling with your future ambitions or career aspirations, my advice would be pray about it. Ask God to reveal the gifts and talents that He has given to you and how He wants you to serve with them. God has a plan for your life. You're not here by accident, and you're not just meant to do what your parents say you should do. Ephesians 2:10 says, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." James 1:17 tells us that every good gift is from God. We all have different talents and God-given gifts. These are all important and can be used to serve humanity and establish God's kingdom here on earth. So it's very important that you pay attention to your gifts and talents and trust God to guide you on what you should be here on earth. I love you, and I'm praying for you.